In 2001, on the 10th anniversary of the Blue Hedgehog, the impossible happened. Sega released a 2D Sonic platformer on a Nintendo system. It's easy to forget how precarious it felt to be a Sonic fan in the late 1990s. The Sega Saturn really didn't bring anything to the table. Sonic's flagship game got canceled. We had Sonic 3D Blast, Sonic R, a bunch of re-releases of Genesis games, but nothing that great. There was a very real possibility that the abysmal Sonic Blast in 1996 might be the last 2D Sonic game we ever got, at least on anything that we could actually play in the United States. Sega put everything they had into the Dreamcast and Sonic Adventure to try to make something, anything that would just give them a shot, but it was too late. Sega's hardware efforts were doomed, and by the time 2001 rolled around, Sega knew it. But something happened. Sega actually seemed to turn it around. They actually made some of the best games in their company's history during this turbulent time. And one of these games? Well, that's Sonic Advance for the Game Boy Advance. Upon release, Sonic Advance crushed it, garnering positive reviews and a huge amount of sales. Yep, while Nintendo is spinning its wheels re-releasing old Mario and Donkey Kong platformers for the Game Boy Advance, Sega, of all entities, was doing the work of making new, portable-first platformers. Sonic Advance was a new start for the series in many ways, and would be followed soon by Sonic Advance 2 and 3 in quick succession. While I remember Game Informer back in the day writing these games off as just more of the same Genesis thing, as if that could ever be a bad thing, these games were distinctly different from anything that came before in both art style and gameplay. Yes, they are loving homages to Sonic on the Genesis, but they also pull from the 3D Sonic Adventure series just as much. And these are portable games first, made for small screens rather than TV sets, making them heirs to the line of games that started on the Game Gear. Sonic Advance was developed by both the Sonic team and a company called Dimps. Dimps was new on the scene, but was full of pros from SNK and Capcom, so despite being one of their first titles, Sonic Advance is a competent game. That might be because some of these SNK developers also worked on Sonic Pocket Adventure, a game that came out for the vanishingly rare Neo Geo Pocket Color in 1999. Sonic Advance is classic 2D Sonic platforming at its best, fast, fluid, and fun to play. Unlike the Game Gear, the Game Boy Advance actually has the power to run a proper physics engine, so jumping and running feels fluid and natural, just like the Genesis games. The actual physics are different from the Genesis, making Sonic Advance their own breed, but especially on this first outing, they feel tight and precise. Overall, the platforming in this game is just really solid. It combines some of the slower Sonic platforming with moments of blasting forward and running through loops in a compelling way. The only time it feels sloppy and off is literally the first act of the first level. The rest is great. Also, in this game you get four characters to play. You got Sonic, who is, Sonic. He jumps, rolls, and does all the usual Sonic things. When he jumps, you can do a little attack move, but it doesn't really make him do anything other than, a little bigger. And it doesn't make him momentarily invincible like in Sonic 3. Every character in Sonic Advance also gets a punch move, for lack of a better term, and Sonic's is the clumsiest, where he just kind of lurches forward. You're better off sticking with the spin dash. Next up, we got Tails, who has all the classic Tails moves brought over from the Genesis, rather than the Game Gear tradition. Run, jump, and hit jump again to fly, continuing to tap the jump button to ascend further. Tails can also attack with his tail. Knuckles rounds out the returning cast, bringing along his classic glide and climb abilities. He's still got a bit of a shorter jump than the others as far as I can tell. However, this time he can punch, which feels better than the other characters because he can actually do like a little 3-hit chain. Finally, we have a completely new character in Amy Rose. Amy's moveset is completely different from Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles, and it makes it feel like a different game when you play as her. Rather than curling up into a ball to spin dash or jump on enemies, Amy has to attack everything with a hammer, otherwise she's vulnerable. She can't get up to speed easily, but she does have a tall jump and leap forward. Playing as Amy is a fun challenge as it makes you rethink your entire approach to levels, relying on springs to clear obstacles and avoiding enemies. It gives the game a ton of replay value, and it's kind of a cool touch. Sonic Advance looks fantastic. Completely jettisoning the crappy pre-rendered 3D of yore, Advance goes all in on stylish pixel art that combines the style of both the Genesis Sonic games with the updated anime style of the Sonic Adventure games. There are tons of cool touches in the UI, and every character model looks great. One thing to keep in mind, when this came out, it was built for this tiny little screen, not your giant 4K monitor. There's a reason why everything is so bright and clearly outlined. If it seems too pixelated when you're playing it, or the sprite's too large, here's a tip. Make it smaller. Play on a smaller screen or in a smaller window on your desktop. You're meant to be able to see everything in frame all at once, not have your eyes bounce around. So, I think one of the best ways to play is on a portable system. Whichever one you happen to have. Maybe one that plays ROMs. Whatever that could be. Music overall is really good in this game, and I love that the Invincibility song is that classic Genesis Sonic jingle. Each act also gets its own music, bringing over one of the best traditions in Sonic 3. If it sounds a bit crunchy, blame the Game Boy Advance for that. The GBA samples are notoriously compressed and can be a bit harsh to modern ears. There's probably a reason the Game Boy SP didn't include a built-in headphone jack. Alright, let's talk about the zones. I'm not sure what about Neo Green Hill Zone, but the first stage of the game starts on the beach, transitions to foliage before ending up on a bridge. The idea of progressing through a real place like this is cool, but for some reason the beach section is really clumsy. The platforms are oddly spaced, and honestly the sloppy design of the very first act kind of turned me off this game back in the day. With the rest of the levels so tightly designed, I'm not sure what happened there. Zone 2 is Secret Base Zone, which feels like a spy movie, starting outside and ending up in a crazy factory that feels right at home in Sonic. Honestly, it's just another variant of the chemical plant zone idea, but Sonic Advance really isn't interested in coming up with new level ideas. And nowhere is that more clear than Casino Paradise Zone, which is a combination of every casino type level that came before, even including some very familiar assets. It's perfectly fine, but still isn't nearly as fun as Sonic 2's original take on the idea on the Genesis. Ice Mountain Zone is another level that feels like more of the same from previous games. Because Sonic Advance is the first 2D Sonic game with the new Sonic Adventure art style, I really can't complain when it apes old levels because they still get reinterpreted a little bit, but, you know, it's nothing new. Next up is Angel Island Zone, which has some beautiful pixel art here, and it's one of the more original zone ideas despite the name. It's a ruins level, but a cool one floating high in the sky. Now, this egg rocket zone has a pretty cool gimmick where time counts down rather than up, and as you climb aboard the egg rocket, segments below fall away. This is just one marathon level, but it's a fun challenge. Cosmic Angel Zone ends the game with a crazy Eggman factory that is yet another staple of Sonic. Beat this level and you're off to the final boss, the number of which depends on if you got all the Chaos Emeralds you find in the special zones. Speaking of which, the special zones in this game are so hard to find that I didn't even know they existed until I looked it up for this review. On all of my casual playthroughs, I never encountered any of the special springs that you need to get to the special zones. Usually when you're designing a game, you want at least one special stage, like entry point, like a big ring or whatever, within easy reach just to give the player a heads up that they should be looking for them. Without a guide, you just need to tediously explore every inch of the map and hope you get lucky because some acts don't even have them. As for the bonus levels themselves, well, they take place in yet another pseudo 3D tunnel, an unfortunate tradition for 2D Sonic that continues here. This time you're falling down an endless tube, one that sort of calls to mind Sonic Adventure again, and you're collecting rings, like always. And oh boy, some of those rings are hard to get. Because this is fake 3D, it really is impossible to tell where anything is without just kind of memorizing the distance. Also, this game gives you zero instructions on how to get the trick rings. It just says failure and you have no idea why. I had to look up online what the heck I was supposed to do. This game is chock full of even more stuff, including a tiny Chow Garden which connects to the GameCube version of the game, and it's one of those cross-platform distractions that always seem insanely complex to set up. Speaking of complex setup, if you had the right mess of cables and a lot of friends, there's even a multiplayer mode in this game. So after all of that, should you play Sonic Advance? Well, yeah, this game's awesome. If you like 2D platformers, this is a great one to get. And also, if you got a Miyoo Mini Plus or maybe an Ambernick device or Retroid Pocket device, this is the perfect game for small screens because it was made for small screens. I also think Sonic Advance is probably the best entry to the Sonic Advance games. Of all three, it's the slowest, the easiest, but it's also just really fun and polished, and it's just a really great way to enter the series. There's a lot to do. This game will keep you busy for a while, and I think it'll be perfect for the Nintendo Switch if they ever bring it to the online library. Hey, by the time you're watching this, it might already be on the Nintendo Switch. Sonic Advance was quite the turnaround for a company that many saw as doomed at this point. It's a really great game, and at this time, it was only 10 years since Sega had created Sonic the Hedgehog, and yet this still feels pretty modern. In fact, this game now is over 22 years old, and holy cow, I'm going to need a minute to think about my mortality. So what do you think about Sonic Advance? Are you playing this game? Have you played it before? Do you have it for your Game Boy Advance? I think it's a pretty good game. I think if Sega released this today as like a brand new game, I don't think many people would have complaints. Like, it holds up pretty well for small screens. By the way, did you know a version of this game came out for the N-Gage? I mean, I've never seen it or played it, but I have to assume that that's got to be the best version of the game, right? Because everybody loves playing Sonic on a vertical screen.